Hey everyone, today I have Josh Allan Dykstra with me today. He is the founder of Strength Doctors, and he also has a book coming out this summer called Designing an Organization That Doesn't Suck. Josh, welcome to my little podcast here.
Thank you very much.
Great, and so in 30 seconds or less, can you please tell me about yourself and about your company?
Sure. I am an author, speaker, consultant, and I help leaders design healthy and energizing work environments. Pretty much everything I do orbits that idea.
Perfect. Now, when I spoke to you last week, you mentioned your company is about 2 years old. You're making money right now. Are you profitable?
Yeah.
No, great. So you have a profitable company. So the field is organizational development. You started
Mm.
it 2 years ago. Did you have experience already in organizational development and you just branched out away from a company? Or how did you go about starting it?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. I did work with a small consulting practice near Pasadena for a while, and then I was on my own for a while before we started Strength Doctors. But yeah, prior to that, my background is actually mostly organizational myself. Like I worked for companies, and so I've not been a consultant, my whole life or whatever. But actually, a lot of my background is I've worked for small companies, huge companies, nonprofits, for profits, and for me, the the common thread between all of these places that I worked was that somebody was miserable. Almost everywhere that I went, this kind of misery at work thing followed me, and sometimes it was me that was miserable, and sometimes it was other people, but they were always there, no matter where I worked and whatever kind of company I worked. And so when I finally started putting the pieces together in my head, it occurred to me that if we could make an impact on improving the well-being of people at work, then we could improve the well-being of people to a large degree in the rest of their lives.
How did you find your first clients then? You partner up, you team up. It
Yeah,
sounds like you already had some clientele,
right.
but from that, how did you get
Yeah.
your clients?
Yeah, then in terms of other clients as we've grown, it's all been about referrals. So it's either
Mhm.
through other relationships that we've built just outside, or the other way that we get business is through speaking engagements.
Okay.
So I do quite a bit of speaking. I've got a book coming out this summer, and so that's another big part of what I do. Uh, and we find that when we engage somebody in that conversation, then they want to start talking about, okay, all right, this is interesting. So how the hell do we do this?
Yeah, so this is
Yeah.
interesting, right? Because you're not cold calling or cold emailing or doing
No.
outbound sales. It's all coming to you inbound. And you said speaking. Something interesting that
Mm-hmm.
we spoke about, I think, last week was that the industry that you're in, organizational design, is, I would compare it to kind of like a vitamin, a luxury, right? A company has to understand that they have these pains and then they'll spend that money to correct them, as opposed to a company, let's say, that's losing money. They want to immediately resolve that. Like an e-commerce store needs to
Mm.
stop shopping cart abandonment. They immediately need to stop that, right? As opposed to this is more educational. You have to teach a company that they need this service. So
Right.
about the speaking, how do you currently get your speaking engagements?
Yeah. Uh, Again, that my answer can be very boring. It's relationships.
Okay.
It's pure network. It's yeah. There's nothing fancy about what I do at all. It's the fact that I know people, and I let them know that I do this,
Mhm.
and a couple friends will give you a shot to do it, and
Yeah.
then you leverage those things into bigger things.
Well, let me ask
That's
you,
pretty
the
much it.
speaking engagements you have, is it at a conference or is it like within a company? Like you just talk in front of all the employees at a company?
Both,
Both.
both.
Uh-huh.
I do some corporate stuff and some conference stuff, and
Hmm.
I try to speak with education audiences as well.
Hmm.
Uh, there isn't as much money in education as you probably would guess.
Hmm.
So for me, but I'm very passionate about education. We end up doing a lot of stuff with the educational world, just because I think it's so important. I've had great educational experiences, and I think it's essential for people. And we certainly need to reimagine the way we're educating people, but education itself is pretty important to me.
Got it. Tell me
Yeah.
about, so continue with the speaking engagements.
Yeah.
Uh, when you approach somebody and say,
hmm
hey, I would love to speak for your conference or your organization, what do you send them? Like a video of you with a prior speaking engagement, or a PDF with stuff they'll learn? Like, what is most
Yeah.
effective for you to land that engagement?
Yeah, I've experimented with a lot of different stuff that way. I definitely do have like the speaker abstract PDF,
Hmm.
that gives the testimonials of people who have seen me speak and my bullet points for what people are going to learn and all that stuff. And it's important to have that in your tool bag because some people will ask you for it.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm really finding that more recently the successful projects for me will come from a custom kind of pitch. So it'll be again somebody I know who's actually doing an event, and so we get together and we talk. And he's like, "Yeah, that would be great for you to come and talk about this. Can you talk about this specific thing?" And so I'll put something together for it.
Hmm.
Or the other thing, but then of course conferences are like that too. They want something custom and new and fresh, and so you have to make something. Um, the other thing that I find myself doing quite a bit now that I've had more practice is having a specific talk that I do. Like I've got a specific talk called "Working in Your Strengths: What the Best Leaders in the World Do Differently."
Hmm.
And so I've done that a number of times, and so that one's just kind of like a in the can talk. Yeah, I've got it really developed, and I can just kind of do it in a very turnkey kind of way. So if somebody wants me to come do it, I just do it. It doesn't take a lot of extra work for me, which is really nice.
Got it. Got it. You already have
Yeah.
it in your back pocket, nothing custom.
Mm-hmm.
You can just go ahead and do it. Great.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot about networking, right? Networking has been most important for you to get clients, speaking
Mm.
engagements. How do you do your networking? Do you just go to
Yeah.
a lot of events? Do you pick up the phone and just call a lot of people? Like you and I met
No.
randomly through the Young Entrepreneur Council, right? We just like
Yes.
messaged each other and we had a good call. Now we're doing a
Yeah.
video. But
Yeah.
how do you do it? How do you meet people? How do you take the time? Are you driving and then while you're driving in traffic in LA, which is horrible, you pick
It
up the
is.
phone and call somebody? How do you do it?
You actually had the best story for how I do networking. So how we met is exactly what I do. So it's a connection through somebody else. I'm always looking to meet more great people, and so I just make it very known that I want to meet more cool people.
Hmm.
And so invariably people will introduce me to cool people, and because everybody knows them. And so I just make it very clear that I want to meet these people, and I'm not afraid to ask for introductions for people if I think that they know somebody that I want to get connected to, and of course I do the same for anybody who knows me. And so for me, I actually wrote a post on this on my blog, I don't know, a couple months back. Uh, but for what do you do if you hate networking? Because I like in the traditional sense, I hate networking.
Hmm.
I hate events. I probably shouldn't admit this. I hate going to, like, I am so not a big event person.
Hmm.
So this like one-on-one thing is awesome. Love it. I love getting to know people in a more intimate setting and having a deeper conversation. But like the surfacey networking thing, it absolutely just depletes me of energy, and so I avoid those things at all costs. And so for me, networking is very slow. I have to get to know people more on a one-on-one basis, and so for me, the long-term strategy of career building is a necessity because I'm not the social butterfly personality type.
Got it. Excellent. That's really good. Networking is slow, but it's very intimate, and you're not a traditional type that's going around to a bunch of networking events, talking to like tens and hundreds of people at an event. Right?
Nope.
Good. But that's good. You've built a profitable company out of slow, intimate networking, and I think that's very positive, and people can learn a lot from that. So then that leads me to a question of you've built a nice relationship with an individual. They have a company, whatever, they work for a company. You say, hey, I could speak for your company about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
It's great, and a lot of the times I think people have no problem maybe making that ask. But then how do you ask for payment for your speaking engagement or payment for your services, once you're in that kind of like friend mode, a
Mm,
question I've been asked a lot is, it's difficult for me to charge my friends or people that I've built relationships with because do they want
yeah,
like a friendly discount from me? How do you do it? Make sure that
yeah,
that you're like, this is what I'm worth and this is why you should pay me, right?
right, right. I do think that gets easier as you get older, because what as you start to work with older people, they start to just expect that more,
Mm.
and kind of as you exit your 20s, it becomes much easier to learn how to ask for money. And so something I think it's one part of that is just like natural and kind of aging, but um, the other thing I think you even just hinted at it is like knowing what you're worth, because if you don't believe that your time is worth money, nobody else is going to.
Hmm.
So knowing that your time has value and your insight has value, and whatever it is that you provide has a specific concrete value, is just it's huge. And believing that, I think, is a big. That's probably the biggest hurdle to being able to ask people for money, because unless you actually believe, you know what, I've spent 15 years in organizations, and I've worked for some of the biggest companies on the planet, and I've got a graduate degree in executive leadership, and so all of these things that we forget these things. We start to feel like the underdog sometimes, and so just having a fair representation of what you bring and what your strengths are and how that can help a person, I think really helps me. So when I think about the end value that I'm creating for a client, that makes it much more palatable for me to say, I want this much money in exchange for what I'm going to do for you, because I'm going to create um, lots and lots of value for
Hmm.
your company. And so this is actually what's fair. Uh, so I think that's been a big part for me, trying to figure that out. But I won't lie to you, pricing is probably the hardest part of what I do.
Mm. Which is leading me to my next question.
Oh, great.
How do you price what your time is worth in a speaking
Yeah,
engagement and hourly for a
yeah.
client? I could walk into a speaking engagement for $1,000 for $10,000, and it's kind of
Hmm.
arbitrary. Does it really just depend on how you present yourself, how you negotiate? How do you do it? How do you price yourself?
Yeah, yeah. To a certain degree, that's true, and that's this field that I'm in is an interesting one in that regard, because to a certain extent, you're only limited by what you can get. There are consultants and coaches and speakers out there, to your point, who are just they rake in the money. They'll charge 20, 30, $50,000 for a keynote. If you've got a best-selling book, you can do that. And so it really is, it's kind of nebulous, because it depends on the public's perception of your brand and how much that you feel like you can command, and how much you can actually get from a client. And so for us and for me, uh, it's been a real learning process, because I'll tell you one thing we've discovered is that it varies by client. And so if we're talking to an educational client, I can get a certain amount of money for either speaking or consulting, and that amount of money is going to be significantly less than what I can get from a corporate client.
Hmm.
So it does vary a lot by who's bringing you in, uh, and I think the other thing to look at in terms of pricing this stuff is to try to do some market research as much as you can. And so find out about, like, try to talk to some people who will actually just kind of give you the straight up truth as to what their rates are,
Hmm.
and try to get a sense of what the market is paying, because that's the other thing, is that flexes and changes. In recession, and as the marketplace takes a dip, then pricing for this stuff goes down because people will take less.
Hmm.
Uh, so it really varies and shifts, and so you always kind of got to keep your finger on the pulse of what's current. And again, for that, it goes back to your network. In order to know what's current, you have to have enough people in your community to be able to ask that question of, or at least enough credible sources to where you can find what is market value right now.
Got it.
So,
Excellent. And the last few questions I have are based around your book. It's launching this summer, I believe, the Designing
yeah,
an Organization That Doesn't Suck. How long have you
yeah.
been writing this book?
Yeah, and that's the subtitle. So the
Oh, okay.
title is actually Igniting the Invisible Tribe,
Okay.
and Designing an Organization That Doesn't Suck is the subtitle. That is a part that everybody remembers, though, because how many of us, don't know an organization that sucks? There's not very many people.
It's true. And
Uh,
then, so how long have you been writing the book?
yeah, so this actually started as a project for grad school. So I've been writing
Oh,
it a
okay.
long time. So over 3 years at this point.
Great. Tell me the end goal, or maybe not the end goal. What is the goal of the book? Increase your brand across the U.S., educate clients. Are you going to send one of these books to each one of your potential clients? Well, what is the goal with the book?
Yeah, I think those are a lot of good ideas, and definitely things that I'm going to do and have considered as to being part of the purpose of this whole project. So yes, definitely building the brand as a thought leader around the future of work, how work is evolving, because this is what I'm really most interested in, is uh, how. So if people are going to continue gathering into tribes, if people are going to continue gathering into these groups in order to accomplish a specific goal, which is all an organization is, then how do we make those tribes better? Because right now they kind of suck. So if we're going to keep doing this, if we're going to keep bothering of getting together and working as groups, then we need to figure out a better way to do it, a way that's life-giving instead of life-sucking. And right now the organizational models we've got are just kind of archaic leftovers from the industrial era, and that argument's been made a lot. But the question is then, how do we respond to this, and what actually do we need to do differently? And so that's probably what I'm most interested in, is how do we actually do this differently, and how do we do things that tangibly make life better for people at work, because there's nowhere that people spend more of their time. And so a big part, yeah, back to your question, I guess the big part of what I want to do with this book is to start conversations. I want to start fires. I want to get people thinking in a new way. I want to poke the box a little bit. I want to hopefully give some people some ideas about how the world is changing, first of all, in a really easy to understand way. Because there's some pretty big changes, and most everyone will agree with you when you talk to them about this. If you get them away from their work and away from their busyness, and I'll let them think for a minute, almost everyone will agree that something about the world is different, and something has changed, and something continues to change, but nobody really knows exactly what it is. And then perhaps more importantly to me is I think that's really important to understand what's going on. But then the next part of that for me is to figure out what the heck we should do about it. And of course my answer is right there in the title, which is to design organizations that don't suck.
Great. Sounds amazing. Well, Josh, absolutely a pleasure speaking with you. I'll put up all your contact information on the bottom. When your book launches, I'll put up a link on the bottom as well so people can go check it out. And
Great.
yeah, thanks so much. I'd love to touch base again sometime in the summer once you've launched the book. Maybe we can talk about how you promoted it, how you got people aware of it, etc.
Sure, sounds good.